This is a story from the 9 Glens of Antrim, and it's a traveller story. We're sitting in a traveller wagon and it just seems like a good story to tell for the setting we're in. One beautiful sunny day, the sky was blue, the birds were singing in the trees. Down this beautiful glen came a traveller wagon. Now traveller wagons are usually brightly painted things, but this one wasn't. It had seen better days. The paint was flaking off it and cracked and faded, and the green canvas roof had stains where the damp had come in when it rained. And the horse pulling it, she'd been strong in a day, but now she was getting old. She'd seen better days, and so had the young fella driving her as well. His clothes were ragged and he was not a successful man. You could see that just by looking at him. Not a prosperous man, but despite this he had a smile on his face. And the reason that he was smiling was because he was heading for Ballycastle and the Lammas Fair, and he was going to get there in 2 or 3 more days, and he was going to see his girlfriend when he got there. She was a traveller like he was, and they crossed paths at different places along the road throughout the year, and he hadn't seen her for weeks, so he was really looking forward to doing so. And as he rode down the glen, he thought, one of these days I'm going to ask that girl to marry me, but it's not going to be yet because, well, look at the state of my clothes. I've got the ideas for making things. He was a tinsmith, by the way. He said, but I can't make them if I don't have decent tools. My tools are all old, and how can I put my ideas into practice with old and ruined tools? But one of these days I'll get some new ones, and then I'll be on my way. And he was just thinking these thoughts when he came to the edge of a small village, and in that village he saw a pub where he might get a pint of beer later on. But now a campsite, he thought. Off he rode through the village until he came to a bend on the road, some good grazing beside it, and he thought, well, this is perfect. He pulled his wagon up onto the grass and unhitched his pony and set her grazing, and then he went to collecting firewood from under the hedge. And when he did that, he noticed a tangled up old gate all overgrown with briar and thorn. And he thought, well, this seems a waste of a good gate, because look, behind that, the gate is a field, a good field. Why isn't it in use? And he thought, well, maybe I'll hear the story when I get to the pub later. Well, when he'd finished his food, he threw his jacket across his shoulder, and the day being a good warm one, he walked back to the village. And when he entered the pub, the people looked up and recognised him for a traveller and made him welcome. They said, you'll be heading for the Ballycastle Lammas Fair, no doubt. And he said, I am indeed. And one of the men said, and where are you camping? He said, well, I'm camped at that bend on the road just out of your village a little way. And when he mentioned the bend on the road, the men went silent, and one of them said, you shouldn't be camping there, you know. Didn't you notice the gate all tangled up? And he said, I did actually, and I wondered at it too. Well, the reason that gate's all tangled up, said one of the men, is because a ghost stands beside it. And we cannot get a cow or a sheep through that gate. And the boy said, well, I didn't see any ghost. And they said, well, you won't during the day, but you'll see it tonight when the moon is up, and it's going to be full tonight. You're going to see that ghost tonight, and you don't want to go anywhere near her, because if you go within reach of her, she'll grab you and pull your throat out. And if you make eye contact with her, her gaze will turn your blood to ice in your veins. Now, he didn't want to look scared in front of the men, but he was very uneasy at hearing about this ghost. So he put a brave face on and laughed it off until he was getting ready to go at the end of the evening. And as he left the bar and started walking up the road, he thought, am I going to see that ghost? I've no choice but to go back to the place where my wagon is. And when he turned the bend in the road, there she was, this terrible creature, with the moon shining upon her. He quickly looked away, didn't want to make eye contact with her, and he thought, well, if I just keep out of arm's reach, I'll be all right. So he started to walk across the grass, but pretty soon her bare feet came into his vision, and the hem of her ragged skirt, and he couldn't help but lift his eyes to look into her face, and when he did, he stepped back. But he thought, hang on a minute, she's not going to hurt me. When he saw her up close, he saw that she was a young woman, a poor ghost standing there, and he thought, well, she means me no harm. I can see that just by looking at her. Whatever she's standing here for, it's not to do any harm to me. He thought, but I'll get ready to jump in case she reaches out. And he took one more step, and sure enough, her arm shot out and nearly made him jump out of his skin. But then he saw that she wasn't trying to reach out and grab his throat. She was handing something out to him. And it was a tin box. And he could see, because of his trade, tinsmith, he could see that the man or woman who'd made this knew what they were doing. It was good craftsmanship, good tinsmithing. And she was trying to give it to him, and he thought, those silly settled people, if they weren't so frightened of their own shadows, she's trying to give them something, not hurt them. And he took it from her. And he said, thank you and God bless you. And she said, what was that? He said, thank you and God bless you. And she said, could you say that one more time? He said, thank you and God bless you. And she said, well, thank you, because now that you've blessed me 3 times, you've set me free. I can go to my rest. I don't have to stand here any longer. She said, many years I've been standing on this spot, since the days of the old famine, when many people like me were on the roads with empty bellies. And I sat down on the grass beside this gate to take a rest, and I was just too tired and weak to get up again. And I died here all those years ago. And ever since I've been trying to give someone this tin box, because what is in it will stop you from starving like I did. Every time you open that tin box, there's a golden coin in it. You take it out, close the lid, open it, there's another one. And he thought, this is going to change everything for me. I can buy I can get married. He said, thanks. And she said, but there's one thing I've got to tell you before I go. If you ever tell anybody the secret of the box, the magic will stop. He said, I've got that, thank you. And with that she was gone. As soon as she was gone, he opened the lid to the tin box, and there was a golden coin. He put it into his pocket, closed the lid, opened it again, another golden coin. Pretty soon he had his pockets full of golden coins. He took an old flour sack from his wagon and filled that with golden coins too, stitched it closed and hid it under a little compartment under the floorboards in his wagon. The next day he was on the road as soon as it got light, heading for Ballycastle, and when he got there, the first place he went was to a man who fixes traveller wagons, and he told him what he wanted: scrape all the paint off, redo it, put a new roof on it, fix it up. Doesn't matter what it costs. And then he went and bought new ponies, and then he went and bought new tools, good soldering irons and cutting tools and bending tools. And then he went and bought himself a suit, a fine suit of clothes and a haircut, and got his little tash waxed as well. And then he went to his girlfriend's father's wagon, knocked on the door, and as soon as the door flung open, there she was, and she threw her arms around him, and she said, look at you. And he said, yeah, what do you think? And she said, I think you look pretty fine. He said, take my arm, we're going to go round the fair. And he showed her his new wagon and get him fixed, his new tools, his new ponies, and he took her round the fair buying things for her, dulce and yellow man, a new shawl for her shoulders, and he was using the tin box to spend money on her, and she noticed the tin box, and she said, where did you get that tin box? And he said, never you mind about the tin box. And he put it in his pocket. At the end of the day, he came to the question that he'd been putting off. He got down on his knee and he said, will you marry me? And she said, of course I'll marry her. She said, but what we'll do, we'll wait till Ballinasloe, the last big fair of the year, when all the travellers come together for the last time of the year, and then we'll be married, because word will be out by then and all our people will come to give us a big wedding. He thought, she's a wise woman. So they swapped golden rings and promised themselves to each other, and 2 weeks later he left that town with a big smile on his face, with his brightly coloured wagon, and with his good strong pony. He was getting into a new village every night, and when they saw the bright wagon coming into their village, they would go down to see what he was selling, and they saw the bright tinware glittering in the sunlight, and he started to do quite well for himself. People bought his work, and although he did use the tin box now and then, he found that as he went through the countryside, he wasn't using it as much as he thought he would be doing. But eventually he went right down the western seaboard through County Sligo and Galway and into those places, until he came in the autumn to Ballinasloe. And as he entered the town, the travelling people were converging on the town, and a great wedding was had. There was boxing matches and horse racing, and a great time for everyone. And when he left town a week later, he was the happiest man alive, because his lovely wife went with him. And up through Ireland they went back into the north, doing quite well for themselves. And exactly 1 year later, when the great wheel had turned, he found himself coming down that very same glen up in the Glens of Antrim, and he said to his wife, this is where all my fortune changed. And she said, and you never did tell me what? And he said, well, it doesn't really matter, let's find my campsite, there's a good campsite down the road. And as they passed the village, he pointed out the pub, and he said that he hoped he might get a pint in it later on. They pulled up onto the campsite and they built their fire, and while he was collecting firewood, he noticed that the gate under the hedge was clear now. All the hedges and the thorns and the briar had all been cut free, and there was sheep and cattle grazing in the field beyond it, and he thought, well, that's a good sign. When their food was finished, he said to his wife, "Do you mind if I go and get that pint of beer?" And she said, "I don't mind at all, so long as you remember that when you come back later, the dishes will be waiting for you." With a smile on his face, he headed for the village. And when he went in through the pub door, the people turned to see who was coming in, and they recognised the traveller boy from a year before. And they made him welcome, and one man said, "Sit down," and ordered a pint for him. And he said, "Whatever you did for us last year, you did us no harm. You put the ghost to rest. We've never seen us since. We can use the field again. So you're always welcome here." And a good night he had with those people in the bar. But when he was putting his coat on to go home at the end of the night, one of the men came up to him and said, "How did you put that ghost to rest? What happened? What did you do last year at that bend on the road?" And he said, "Well, you silly settled people, if you weren't so frightened of your own shadows, you wouldn't have been afraid of that ghost, because she wasn't trying to hurt you. She was trying to give you something. She was trying to give you this tin box, and I'm glad that I'm the man that took it from her, because every time you open it, there's a tin and there's a golden coin inside it." And he realised what he'd done. He thought, "You foolish man, you've told the secret of the box." And when he was alone, he opened the box, and sure enough, the box was empty for the first time ever. And he was so angry with himself, but he thought, "Hold on a minute, you don't need the tin box anymore. You've got your trade, you're doing well with your new tools, your good wagon, your good clothes, your good ponies, and best of all, you've got your lovely wife. You've got everything a man could want in this world." And he was just going to throw the tin box in the bin when he thought, "Still a good tin box though, and you don't throw a good tin box away." And he put it into his pocket, and off he went into the night with a smile on his face. And just before I finish, can I just show you what this tin box is? It's a lantern as well. So it's got gold in it, but not a golden coin. There we go.